Good evening, one and all. Hope you all have the happy Diwali. Wish you all a happy Diwali and pollution-free Diwali also. I welcome our esteemed speaker, Dr. Rachel, along with my co-host, Dr. Janita Jasuja. Thank you, Dr. Rachel, for accepting our invitation to deliver an interesting talk on detecting and investigating firearm incidents, which is going to be very useful for all the scientists, those who are working in the field of ballistics, and also the students, those who want to make their career as a ballistic experts. I welcome you. She's an associate professor of forensic science. I request my co-host, Dr. Janita D'Souza, to read a brief about our today's instructor. Dr. Janita, over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to introduce Rachel, ma'am. Dr. Rachel Bolten King is an associate professor of forensic science at Staffordshire University, specializing in firearms and ballistic. She is a technical advisor for the Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners, professional member of the Chartered Society of Forensic Sciences, and incoming editor in chief of Science and Justice Journal. Rachel works on multiple disciplinary international projects, particularly focusing on the manufacturing non destructive detection, examination, and analysis of firearms and ammunition. Over the last 10 years, she has published numerous research articles and book chapters speaking at international conferences and industry events. In 2019, Rachel was awarded a Winston Churchill Fellowship researching the people, processes, and technologies used to advance firearm investigation across the South Africa, USA, UK, and France. Dr. Bolton King is keen to support the development of academia industry partnerships, for example, through the Staffordshire Forensic Partnership and the development of Research for Justice, a centralized platform sharing open access research relevant to international justice system.
Thank you, Dr. Janita D'Souza, for giving introduction to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Rachel Bolton King. I request our speaker to take over the session. Madam, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm just sharing my screen now. So hopefully everyone can see this. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be speaking with you all. So today I'm going to be talking about the detection and the investigation of firearm incidents. And this is based on the research that I've been doing with international organisations, as was introduced just now, based on my Winston Churchill Fellowship and also the last 10 years of experience I have and the interactions that I've had professionally with those working in the criminal justice system, particularly around policing and also forensic science and ballistics experts in particular. So today I'm going to share with you the scope of what I consider as firearms and firearm related incidents, and in particular the technologies that are utilised in order to further enhance and improve the detection and the investigation of firearm related crime, the challenges and the opportunities that also come with investigating these forms of incidents, and some of the recommendations that I've come up with and I've been presented with, and I've worked with colleagues in order to try to implement and enhance the crime solving rates or the detection and investigation processes that I hope that you will be able to also learn and benefit from today. So when it comes to firearms and ammunition, firearms are usually the key and the focus of investigations. So this isn't necessarily the way it should be considered. Ammunition plays an essential part of any investigation where a shooting or a firearm discharge has actually occurred. We could spend hours talking about each and every slide that I'm going to present to you today. And so what I thought I'd do was actually focus on the areas that I think may be less well known or the areas in which I feel that multiple organisations within the criminal justice system may be able to benefit, because I know there's a diverse audience as well today. So firearms in particular, when we're talking about criminal investigations, they're often utilising smaller caliber firearms. So things like pistols, revolvers, maybe shotgun, homemade or craft-made weapons. It may depend strongly on the country in which that firearm is being utilised as to how prevalent one or a particular type of firearm might be utilised, including different calibers, etc. Ammunition is one of the parts, I think, that actually is more often forgotten about. And it is actually, as I mentioned, essential when it comes to a shooting. And ammunition typically designed first, firearms designed to then support that ammunition and to discharge it, because the ammunition is designed for a specific purpose. So it has different functionality as a result. And so when it comes to criminal use of firearms and ammunition and the trafficking of those firearms and ammunition, they may actually utilize ranges of ammunition within one particular firearm. You're not necessarily going to have the criminal actually acquire a nice purchased box of ammunition and utilize the same ammunition for any shootings or any discharges that particular firearm may occur. If ammunition is more difficult to get hold of, for example, then you might find that a range of different material compositions, different brands of ammunition, different types of projectile within that ammunition may actually be utilized and found at a crime scene. And this can affect our ability to link crimes together and also prosecute against those crimes as well. When it comes to firearm related incidents, again, most people tend to focus, or most people tend to think about bloodshed related injuries and incidents. So anything involving a shooting. Whereas actually the reality is that firearm related crime is much, much more diverse than that. And also firearms oftenly are encountered in a range of other criminal activities, with firearms being utilized as a method of demonstrating threat or a power status, or as a method of self-defense. So for example, firearms and drug-related crime do often go hand in hand. The number of gun crime or recorded gun crime figures in each country are also going to differ, and some countries are going to have other weapons that might be, such as stabbings, a higher rate of crime than what we know about the firearm incidents, whereas other countries it might be the other way around, and firearms are one of the primary causes of homicide or death. But actually, your firearm related incidents cover not only the possession of firearms and ammunition, and we have to remember that there are similar related offences, for the illegal possession of ammunition as there is with firearms. It could be theft of that firearm and or ammunition. It could be the manufacturing of the firearm or the ammunition. And clandestine manufacturing facilities are something that I think are often overlooked, particularly if those searching or raiding premises for a completely unrelated or different purpose, and there is no information, no intelligence that there are firearm related activity on that premises, then unless the police or the search team are actually well versed and they know what they're looking for, they may often overlook any kind of manufacturing equipment or telltale signs that manufacturing and illegal manufacturing may actually be occurring there. And therefore the rate of detecting clandestine manufacturing facilities for firearms is probably under recorded. You then also have, obviously, the shootings, the firearm discharges themselves, as well as the trafficking of firearms and ammunition from a place of origin until the place of use and discharge. So and that is only some of the firearm related crimes that are being recorded and reported to police and investigated. So when it comes to crime reporting and our solving rates, depending again on where you're based in the world, there has been research to demonstrate that actually 80 to even 98% of firearm discharges are never actually reported to 911. So that was a statistic based on research that was done predominantly in the United States. And when it comes to South Africa and also other countries as well, potentially fewer people are actually reporting crime to the police as well. In the UK, we're finding that for some types of crime, the reporting rates are luckily increasing. So people are being more confident about going to the police and reporting criminal offences. But this isn't necessarily reflective of all forms of crime, including gun crime. The other challenge is the fact that in the UK, our crime solving rates are actually incredibly low, and that are at an all-time low of about 7% at the moment. So as you can see as well, year on year, our ability and our communities that are actually reporting crime, the amount of crime that's actually occurring, particularly firearm related crime, is significantly lower than the reality of the situation. So I think it's really important that we look at strategies and approaches that help us detect that these crimes are occurring, because understandably people may not be confident, they may be fearful of their life, they don't want to report information that they know about firearm related offences to the authorities, because they're at fear of their life for themselves, but also their family as well. And so we need to look at more objective ways of doing that. So hopefully I'll introduce you to some which you probably know about already, but in case you don't, some of the technologies that are associated. So from a prosecution's perspective, we're hoping that we can acquire the firearm that was used in any particular shooting. And I am going to focus on firearm related discharges and shooting incidents today, just to try and narrow the scope within the time frame. So from a prosecution perspective, we want to be able to find the firearm itself, and we want to then be able to compare the test fires from that firearm, so ammunition that's test fired that then creates a fired bullet or a fired cartridge case, for example, and compare those to the fired ammunition components, bullets, cartridge cases that might be found at the crime scene, to determine whether it was that particular firearm that was used in any particular shooting incident. So the images that you can see are examples of comparisons that are being made between two fired projectiles, two fired bullets at the top, and their land engraved areas. So the individual striations that are the unique feature that allow us to identify a particular firearm that has discharged that projectile. And then the primer cap of a fired cartridge case at the bottom, with again its individual characteristics and class characteristics that help us to identify or to eliminate potential firearms as being the one that may have discharged at that particular shooting. However, unfortunately, firearms are often not recovered, generally not at the crime scene, and they may not be recovered for years and years after any one particular shooting incident. And as a result, the actual value of collecting firearm related evidence is more for intelligence purposes, and also to link crimes together, to demonstrate that one particular firearm may have been used in a multitude of different shootings. And again, depending on the country that you're particularly operating in as a criminal justice professional, that will depend on the type of firearms, type of ammunition, and the range of weapons that you'll typically encounter, as well as the number of firearms that are often used in one particular shooting, and how many rounds or cartridges of ammunition may actually be discharged in one particular incident. So in order to help us better investigate and detect firearm related crimes, there is a load of different technology that we can actually utilize and exploit. When it comes to detection, gathering information and actionable intelligence is really crucial from our communities. So we can report through social media, we can report through apps like WhatsApp, we can also obviously call emergency services. We might actually have community-based volunteers who actually gather the information that may be within the community and then report that either anonymously or with sort of named attribution to the police in order to help with their investigations and their detection of crime. Alternatively, we have some more expensive methods that are technology-based and much more objective in bypassing people and actually being able to detect that firearm incidents are occurring right now and help us to respond much more rapidly. So a lot of cities where high gun crime occurs are employing gunshot detection systems, or if you're at a port or a border control point, then you might utilize X-ray in order to detect that firearms and ammunition may be being smuggled across your borders. But firearms may be a little bit easier. They're still not easy to interpret X-ray images, but they might be easier to detect. However, ammunition may not be so easy to detect. And particularly if those firearms and or ammunition are actually broken down into their individual component parts, the individual parts that make up the firearms and the ammunition, the people monitoring those X-ray images may not have been fully trained in actually what they look like. And an object that's looked sort of end on looks very different and is much harder to identify as a potential threat within that image compared to an object viewed from the side. So the perspective of X-ray imaging can be quite difficult to interpret and needs lots of training in order to do that. There's also obviously methods of video capture, so CCTV, etc., which is monitored in real time, that also can be linked with other technologies as well to increase the rate and the response time. When it comes to the identification of firearms, we've got technologies now being developed and tested to look at triaging fired evidence, particularly in mass shooting incidents, and also trying to detect and crime series, so where lots of shootings may involve exactly the same firearm. 3D imaging systems and the databases that and the algorithms that are used can then link those crimes together and further confirm that with the use of our traditional comparison microscopy methods. When we're looking at CCTV images or anything like music videos, we're also experts are now also utilizing methods to try and identify whether the firearm is similar to, in terms of its make and its model and the type of weapon, to the firearm that may have been recovered or may have been used in a particular shooting incident. So databases like basically IMDb for firearms, so movie databases, particularly focused around firearms, can actually help with identifying what make and model of the firearm may actually be in a CCTV image or a music video, for example. And they can then help to link a particular individual to the possession of that firearm. There's also methods that I'll show you as we go through today's session, looking at forming hotspots and using the data that we actually have around firearm incidents much more effectively to help investigators both investigate, but also to predict when crime may occur and where it may occur, and then help us in order to identify where police resources could be positioned in order to actually help detect the crime has happened or even prevent it from happening. And we also use social network analysis, which isn't about analysing social media. It's actually a method that allows us to look at who may be one of the key players within the community to identify informants, or also to identify who the shooters may be. So a whole range of hardware and software related technology that we can really make use of to help us investigate and detect and even prevent future firearm related crime. But the key to any technology by itself is never going to work. It's never going to be successful. It's actually the people that utilize that technology and that have the right approach that are actually the key, in my opinion, to the actual success of any particular technology. If someone doesn't believe that it's ever going to work, or if when you test it out, you don't design that test appropriately, then it isn't going to be successful. You also need to establish the right processes that actually mean that the people that are supposed to follow those processes actually buy in and they actually follow those processes. Because again, unless you can get everybody working together and everybody implementing the processes correctly and designing those processes correctly in the first place, without all three parts working effectively together, unfortunately, whatever approach you're trying to use to either reduce crime or to improve investigations or crime solving rates, it's never going to succeed. It's absolutely imperative that everyone works together. But there are obviously some major challenges and also some practice inconsistencies. When we think about crimes that might occur, most firearms, from research, we know that they tend not to move about 50 miles away. They're not used more than about 50 miles away from their first use. Obviously, there are exceptions to this, but generally they don't travel very far, and most of their discharges are within that radius. However, whenever you are located near a border of somewhere, it's even more important that you'll have really clear communication and methods of being able to investigate across those borders, which becomes particularly difficult when they're different countries with different governments and politics and laws as well. And this is sometimes where criminals they'll find those weaknesses and exploit them. So you may also have, even within a country or a region, difference in job satisfaction, differences in pay. You might have, because the criminal justice system is incredibly complex and it can take a long time for any particular case to get through the criminal justice system, you might find that some parts of the process may be less effective than others. So you might find that your forensic labs are working as hard as they possibly can to link all the crimes together, provide that information to the police. But unfortunately, for some reason, maybe the prosecution isn't actually enabling them to convict those individuals that are charged, or it might be that parts of the investigating team maybe aren't well trained enough, or there's not enough of them. Their resources are quite restricted for the number of crimes that they're having to investigate. Alternatively, it might be that the actual collection methods maybe aren't optimal. They're not finding all of the evidence at the particular scene. So unless all those stages, the police, the forensic scientists, the prosecutors and the defense, unless the entire chain is working effectively together with the community, again, there is not going to be an as efficient and effective strategy and outcome for our communities and for the cases that we're investigating and trying to solve. Some countries may also have shooting investigations domestically, more of their focus rather than the trafficking side. And if we only focus on one, whilst it's understandable from a resource constraint perspective, it's also a challenge, because then you're not preventing the supply and the demand of that particular source of firearm or ammunition. We'll also find that there are various different systems and processes happening both within the same country, maybe in different states or counties or regions, as well as between different countries. And so any difference in process and practice will cause barriers and potentially aspects that are going to stop your investigations being as effective and efficient as they could be. You've also got databases, whether they're police or forensic lab databases, that aren't compatible with each other. There's not enough data sharing agreements between different labs, different police forces, different countries. And that is a really significant problem, particularly with firearm related investigations. We also globally don't use forensic data very well. And again, this is primarily because police forces understandably need to focus most of the training for police officers, investigators, detectives, etc., on the policing aspects that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And maybe the forensic awareness, the forensic training may not be as extensive as it needs to be to ensure that actually those investigations are actually generating forensic evidence, but also that when those reports come back to those officers, they actually understand what the information is that the forensic scientists are actually trying to tell them. And one of the things that's been frequently coming up, so all of these challenges and practice inconsistencies are what I've found through my research, through talking and working with practitioners in various different countries. And it's all the same challenges always being raised. So this isn't a country specific problem or a region specific problem. These are challenges that are faced globally that really need addressing. And the thing that is often missed when people talk about their job, they never get any feedback. Whatever stage of that investigation or that criminal prosecution they're in, they don't get the feedback that helps them then to learn, to develop, to then ensure that the next time, the next case that they're working on, they're doing the same, they're doing the things that they doing well. They don't continue to do them necessarily, and they don't stop doing the things that maybe they aren't doing as well as they could be. So that feedback loop is really important, but is often one of the first things that get forgotten about or deprioritized when your caseload or your workload is incredibly high. But actually, that's one of the key factors that can really help individuals be more productive. So I mentioned the use of different technologies, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these technologies. Again, being aware that, you know, within one of these technologies, we could do an hour-long lecture on how they work, how successful they are, how they've been implemented, etc. So this is just a general overview to make you hopefully a little bit more aware of them, and also to see and evaluate whether you're utilizing these within your region, or whether this is something that you might want to explore and evaluate to see whether it would help you and your criminal justice system to detect and investigate crimes any better. So Shotspotter is just one of the manufacturers of gunshot detection systems, and they are the most prevalently used by law enforcement across the world. And basically they're outdoor acoustic sensors. So within a square kilometre, you'll often find about 10 of these sensors positioned, usually about 7 meters or above in the outdoor environment. It depends on how tall your buildings are, etc., because you want those acoustic waves in order to be detected amongst and beyond sort of high-rise buildings, etc. And they often are positioned on pre-existing infrastructure, so things like lampposts where there is a source of electricity, and there may also be close proximity CCTV cameras, etc., that they can link into and sort of combine the use of technologies that are already in existence. The key thing about this system is that it allows you to accurately and objectively alert police in less than 60 seconds to any shooting, any discharge of firearm that has occurred within that field of where those sensors actually are. And that is really, really important. And the research has demonstrated that when Shotspotter is implemented, both the number of shots fired, the location and the sequence of those shots fired can be determined, and the duration of fire often is significantly reduced because of the rapid response of police or first responders to the scene. Because the responders don't need to wait for a witness to actually, or a victim to report that the shooting has happened, That's led to reduced response times for ambulance and emergency personnel, and reduced the transportation time for victims actually getting to hospital as well. It's also increased the amount of tactical intelligence, the information that police have about the shooting incident before they get there, so they can better plan what their strategy is going to be in order to effectively resolve and safely bring the shooter to stop that shooting incident occurring. And it's also allowed us to demonstrate that the amount of fired evidence that we're actually recovering from crime scenes is nowhere near the actual number that actually have been discharged. So because this is an objective system, and it tells us it tells us exactly how many shots were fired, and it geographically plots exactly where those discharges occurred and when, that can tell us exactly where to tell either the crime scene investigators or the police officers where to look for those fired cartridge cases, and even potentially those fired projectiles that may have missed and or traveled through individuals or ricocheted off surfaces, so that the amount of evidence that actually can be collected at a scene can be more quickly collected and more completely collected as well. So when I've asked officers how confident they think that they've been able to recover all the fired evidence before they had Shotspotter, for example, they said, oh yeah, you know, at least 70% or something like that of our fired cartridge cases we recover. After Shotspotter, maybe 30%, 20%, 40%. So they've actually got objective metrics now that can demonstrate their ability and the challenges or their efficiency in actually collecting that firearm evidence. Obviously, there are some limitations. It's an incredibly expensive piece of kit. Only the areas actually covered by the sensors are going to be going to detect these shooting incidents, and they need to be outside. So there's also that potential for them to be for them to miss discharges, and there have in some states or countries been some privacy concerns about the fact that as soon as that sharp, loud noise has been detected, that the recording starts, and that can record individuals' conversations for a very short duration if they're in the proximity of the sensor. So but then that's also been beneficial because it's maybe captured the names of the victims or the witnesses or the shooters. So there's both parts to consider as well. So whilst it might be a limitation, it might also be a benefit to the investigation as well. So this is what Shotspotter specifically looks like when I went over to their headquarters in California. And they have different pieces of software designed for different people. So whether you're responding and attending the crime scene, whether you are performing tactical operational support, for those that are responding, you literally do get a GPS and a map that tells you exactly where the discharges have occurred, so you can go straight there. Whereas when I've been out with teams responding to shooting incidents, if you're just getting information from witnesses, they don't necessarily know exactly where the shooting was. They can hear it's happening somewhere in an urban setting, but the acoustics are bouncing off all of the walls, and therefore they can't specifically pinpoint where it might be unless they've literally seen it in action. And so this is a massive time saver. And there's also the ability to actually forensically analyze the acoustics and the recordings that are actually collected. So the technology over the last 20 years has rapidly advanced as well. And so even if you utilize this technology 10 years ago, it's not the same system as they're implementing now. And so just because something may not have worked 10 years ago, if you were to repilot, reevaluate whether the system is going to work for you now, you may find a very different outcome. And that perspective, that personal opinion of whether technology is going to work, whether it's worth the money, whether it's going to do what it says it does, that's a person's opinion. And that opinion can be biased, it can be old, it can be based on hearsay. And so if you're in doubt, what's the harm in piloting it again? If shootings and the number of discharges, particularly involving a number of different firearms, is something that may frequently occur in your particular region, it may be worth considering the use of ballistics triage kit. So Vigilant Solutions has developed ballistic search, which is around looking at trying to classify. So you take all the fired cartridge cases that are found at the scene, you input them into the system. It's a 2D camera image that gets created, and then the algorithm performs an analysis on those images, and it indicates how many different firearms, individual guns, they think have been utilized, and how many of the cartridge case are associated with each one of those particular guns. And then it also indicates which of the samples from each of the guns is the best sample to be selected. And these then get confirmed, they get reviewed by a firearm expert, and then that information gets confirmed to the user. And the user, it's a relatively simple piece of kit, so it can be used by a technician or a police officer. It doesn't have to be a forensic ballistic expert because it's about triage, and it gets confirmed by an expert. And then that best sample can be used to help you identify which of the cartridge cases then gets put into a ballistics identification system. So it can be a way of helping you to streamline your process and to make it also more timely and efficient. And each of the images, takes a maximum of 2 minutes from the point of which you're opening your item, your evidence bag, and to the point of putting it in the system, imaging it, taking it out. It's a total of 2 minutes for each cartridge case. But again, they're working to make that even faster and even more effective and efficient, utilizing the feedback and the evaluations from their pilot organizations and police departments at the moment. So I mentioned our ballistics identification systems, and there are a number of them that are manufactured. Some of the key ones are IBIS, manufactured by Ultra Electronics Forensic Technology, but there's also Arsenal, there's also Alias, there's also EvoFinder, another key manufacturer as well. All of these are enabling three-dimensional images to be obtained of bullets and/or cartridge cases. And then the 3D images get saved into the database. And that database is then used to correlate against any 3D image that's captured from any future fired bullet and/or fired cartridge case. So these systems have been around for over 20 years, and they are so more sophisticated in terms of their algorithms and their ability to link known cases, known firearm, known discharged bullets, known discharged cartridge cases to each other. And they've been instrumental in solving cross-border crime and also local crime as well. And this means that from an investigative perspective, if you think that there are 20 different shootings that have happened, you might have 20 teams of officers and investigators working on each one of those shootings. But actually, utilizing a database, you can actually determine that they're not 20 different shootings. It's one firearm being used in all of those. So actually, there's not 20 investigations. There's one investigation, because that firearm is either being used by one person or a relatively well-known group of individuals, which means that then your resources from a policing perspective can be pooled and they can be targeted, and that information can be much more successful. And you can also get potentially a higher sentence if you can convict those or that individual. So these have been absolutely instrumental in firearm labs, but also for police investigations as well. But when we consider firearms and ammunition, it's not just about the forensic evidence that gets collected and that can get provided in court. Actually, it's about what information do we have about the crime or the crimes, about the firearm, about the ammunition or the inferred firearm if we've never recovered that firearm. We can use that. That's really vital information, vital intelligence that can help us in order to determine if there are new trends, if there are new instances of firearm either shootings or trafficking or manufacture. We can utilize this data much more effectively, both in a laboratory-based setting as well as in a police context as well. So your fired ammunition components, and sometimes those firearms, they might come into the lab. They get entered into a database. They also would have been entered into a police database prior to them arriving at the lab. This database allows us to gather that crime-related information: type of firearm, manufacturer, model, caliber. Depending on the level of information, it might be the serial number, the location of the shooting, or where the firearm was recovered. What type of ammunition was found? Was it live? Was it discharged? What stage of assembly was it in? All of this information is already in your database, but it's not necessarily being utilized. We're not analyzing it necessarily the way it could be exploited and helping us to investigate and to detect that other crimes might be occurring. So the evidence might, if it's a firearm, that might get test fired. If it's fired ammunition components, depending on which system you've got, enables you to do both bullets and or cartridge cases. You acquire that 3D data. You may have had some triaging before then if you've got that system. Or if you don't have 3D imaging systems, then you may be going straight to comparison microscopy. But the chances are, if you haven't got a 3D image system or a database related to fired ammunition components, you're actually missing a key form of intelligence and case linkage potential, because unfortunately, as amazing as humans are, we're actually not able to contain all the information from all the cases that one lab or a whole region or a whole country may be investigating at any one time. And so that's why these databases can provide, again, some really valuable and rapid intelligence that then can be fed to police officers, investigators, detectives, before we've actually confirmed and done a full comparison microscopy on those items to determine an evidential hit. We're actually missing an opportunity to get some relatively reliable intelligence out to those investigators in the time that they actually need. So as and when we create an evidential hit, or we provide a report that says the shooting here was related to the shooting there, the forensic experts might create a ballistics linkage report. So we're basically saying that this shooting, the same firearm was used in this shooting or all of these shootings. But from talking with and doing research with investigators, unfortunately, these are some of the comments that are often coming out. So it takes too long to get the report. They need it in less than 24 hours. It's taking potentially 5 days, 7 days, 28 days. It's too slow. They're reading the reports and they're too technical. They don't really know what they mean. They might actually be missing from the police docket. So unfortunately, if officers don't really understand the value of these reports and how they can help them, then they're not really using them within their investigative process. Sometimes those reports may just have a link of numbers of cases at the end of them. And again, that's going to be very time consuming for enforcement to put those pieces together, work out what cases they are, etc. We need to be able to put that information into a method or a way of sharing that information that is much more useful to them. They also really struggling with resources in terms of their caseload, just as forensic scientists may be with their caseload. Okay, so there's a whole range of different points that get made, and challenges and barriers that are actually preventing the work that forensic scientists are actually doing being as valuable and as well utilized within the investigation process and the prosecution process as they could be. So a case visualization or a link chart is a way that police officers and investigators really understand. They can look at this and they go, oh yeah, I can see that, the little triangle on the left, that one firearm, that one pistol was actually used in a particular shooting, in a murder, but then it also went back out and was recovered for a second time. So sometimes firearms, they might come into the lab, but then that firearm may go back out into the civilian population, either legally or illegally, and it may actually get utilized in another case. Alternatively, if the firearm isn't recovered, or you're investigating one particular shooting, you can actually link it to other fired cartridge cases, for example, and different crimes in which the same firearm has been utilized. So you can create these linkage charts to focus on whether it's a firearm, a bullet, ammunition, or the specific cases themselves. So this is utilizing software such as IBM's i2 Analyst Notebook software. So it might not be the laboratory and the forensic ballistic experts that know how to use this technology or this software, but it might be the police crime or intelligence analysts that do know how to use it. And, so actually getting the two professionals together and to help each other work out how do we write these reports so that they're useful, and what information do the intelligence analysts need or the investigators need to make sure they're as useful as they can be. So it's about that communication, that dialogue, and that working together maybe in a different way to what we have done before. So this is a particular example in South Africa. And you can see in the top right-hand diagram that this one particular firearm was used in all of these different shootings between 2011 and 2014. Alternatively, the one at the bottom, it was this particular cartridge case there was no firearm that was recovered, and these were actually linked to another series of discharges and shootings. So even when the firearm isn't recovered, which is unfortunately more often than not, you can still, this is really valuable information and intelligence to work with. So when we're gathering all of this data around, discharges and other types of firearm offence, it's really vital that we don't forget about all the other types of crime where firearms might be utilised, and exploit that and actually analyse using software, crime mapping software, that allows us to look at where these hotspots, but should be called high density regions of particular types of crime or particular firearms, or the type of firearm or an ammunition that might be used, or the type of activity that's relating to firearm is occurring. And we can analyse these and then deploy resources appropriately within our police investigations and within our communities. And in addition to this, and this is where, particularly in the US, they are really focusing on developing crime gun intelligence centres. So this is where police, forensic analysts, and investigators are working together in order as a specific team in order to process and gather and analyse and investigate these forms of crimes cooperatively, collaboratively. It's a team that's stationed together. They work together very closely with their crime lab. And it needs those police officers, those detectives, in order to understand the value that this collaborative work has to make this successful. So they're utilising all the technology, hardware and software that's available to them. And what they're actually doing is they're also employing this social network analysis. So there's a range of different software that allows you to do this. So I mentioned i2 earlier, but there's also freeware as well. And so depending on the resources in that police department, they might be using one or another, or it might depend on how big the case and complex the case is, or how many firearm crimes they might have to investigate. But the key thing is that these social networks allow you to see the nodes, these little colored symbols that tell you can ask it different things. So it could be, who is the most frequently encountered person that's involved in all these shooting incidents? So it's not the shooter necessarily, but it's somebody who's very close to the shooter, that's usually a witness, but you don't necessarily know that they're a witness if you consider each shooting on its own. But the system, the software, analyzes all the information in your police database, and it suggests where the points of commonality are. So it's suggesting to you, right, this person, he's not a victim and he's not a shooter, or she, but they are really closely connected to them. This person could be a really important either covert intelligence source, somebody like an informant, somebody who you could ask for information that might help you solve this particular shooting incident or a series of shooting incidents. So these systems can be used to analyze big data that humans just unfortunately cannot process all on their own. And so, and this again, it shows it in a really visual manner, so that then the right individuals can be selected and sort of further investigated and potentially used to help that investigation. But again, even when there are all these technologies, even when the people really want to implement these new processes and work effectively together, there's always going to be challenges. But it's about, how do we overcome those challenges? Which things do we focus on solving first, like in a short period of time? Which ones are more mid-term? It's going to take a bit longer. Maybe we don't have the technology yet, but we're looking to explore it, and maybe we'll implement it in the future. But it's usually things around the decision-making processes, people at management level who hold the purse strings and the finances, you know, or making a decision and implementing it takes a lot of time. People are they control the speed of things, and whether something is allowed or not allowed, whether it works or doesn't work. So if those people if you can explain to them and show the evidence that proves that this would be a really valuable thing to do, or to try and see if this new approach might work, then try and provide them with that evidence that's going to persuade them to do it. If things are really, really slow, that's again not going to be great as a criminal justice outcome. And if people working still in their silos, still only considering their job, which is understandable, you know, everybody's working excessively, especially during this pandemic. And if we've got reduced staffing or higher caseloads, etc., you know, labs are going into backlog, and we appreciate, you know, this is a really tough time. But actually, even those that are going and getting greater backlogs, if they're implementing these changes, are seeing those backlogs actually reduce. There's also always going to be challenges around, you know, how many people and what staff and resources we have. So then making things as efficient for those individuals and as timely as possible is fundamental to make our jobs actually easier, and so that we can be more productive and we can get more done in whatever time we are allocated for our job. When the technology doesn't work, understandably, that has a massive impact on not only your caseload, but also the investigations and its ability to progress. And also, you know, there is this fundamental issue that I'm finding between forensic scientists and the terminology that we use versus the language that and the terminology that police officers use. And I did a series of work over the summer and demonstrated that with this particular group of individuals, the officers were very, very heavy on focusing on the firearms themselves rather than kind of the broader picture of forensic evidence. It was looking for firearms and looking for firearm related incidents like shootings. And therefore the words that they were actually putting in the police database weren't correct. They didn't really know what they were looking at. Therefore, when they were trying to analyze the data and search the data, their crime analysts, well, the terminology is totally different. And so it's very hard for those analysts to understand which things are similar, which things are different, because the words that the people are putting in the database are all different. And therefore, if we're sort of giving instructions as lab analysts and forensic scientists, the terms that we're using that might clearly explain what this particular type of firearm is, or what this particular type of ammunition is, or whatever, they're not words that the police officers necessarily understand. And so police officers may say bullets, whereas our understanding of the term bullet is totally different. It's not a bullet is a cartridge of ammunition, because that's a cartridge. And police officers aren't understanding that a cartridge isn't a bullet, which is a projectile or a type of projectile. And so there are these massive barriers just in terms of the terminology. And so, but they are, and they can be something relatively easy to solve, but it might take a long time in order to do that. So based on the research that I've been doing, you know, what are my recommendations really? You know, how can we make things better? How can we move things forward? It is obviously going to differ depending on your region, the criminal justice system you employ, the involvement and the relationship that you have with your investigators within the police departments, as well as your relationship and how your laboratory is structured as well. So there are lots of considerations, but these generally are what we been discussing about trying to sort of implement in order to make things more timely and more efficient between police forces and forensic laboratories moving forward. And one of the key ones is around trying to improve police training, awareness and understanding of firearms, ammunition, and the associated incidents, and how forensic evidence in its broadest terms can be utilised. Also making sure that the terminology within that training is then consistently understood, and really simple diagrams that can help them to actually determine what firearms, ammunition, fired ammunition components, where they go for processing. So if you've got a firearm and it's found in the possession, in the hands of a person, well, why send it for DNA analysis? You found it in their hand. All DNA is going to say is, yes, they held it. It doesn't tell you when they held it. It doesn't tell you they shot that firearm in any particular shooting that occurred. They're just in possession of it. So does that evidence then need to go for that forensic analysis? Because if so, it's going to slow down the process before it gets then sent to the firearm lab for test firing, and then the evidence then get putting in the ballistics imaging system, and then that report getting to the investigators. And generally to make the actionable intelligence from firearm labs much faster, i.e. for any particular shooting, between ideally less than 48 hours, but actually ideally more like 24 hours. So if we can actually generate intelligence from the potential of crimes, shootings to be connected, and if we can suggest what type of firearm police should be looking for as quickly as possible as that evidence comes in the lab, triaging and or inputting into your ballistics imaging system fired ammunition components from a scene should be really, really quick. You should be doing that like immediately that day. Because if it's longer than 48 hours, police officers, the information that they can gather from witnesses, people, the progress that they can make is massively affected by that delay. So, you know, in the UK, we do provide those intelligence reports, but in the US in particular, they are focusing on those intelligence reports more than they are their evidential reports. They're only then doing evidential comparisons using comparison microscopy when it's getting called to case, when it's getting called to go to court, or when it's needed to prove that association, and then it's being requested specifically. So the US, I think, are the most advanced at the moment in terms of their ability to investigate, detect, and look at solving firearm-related crime. So it's all about developing national solutions that can be utilized. So the same process, identify people champions that can pilot new technology if you can afford to buy new technology, or if it's just a change in process, then identify the right people that are passionate about that change, about that potential for improvement. Because if you choose someone who doesn't want to do it, you're not going to get a successful outcome. And then evaluate that change. Monitor what it was like before, what it was like after, and actually see how that process change, how that technology, how it's impacted on workload for people, people's perspectives, and criminal justice outcomes. And then if that pilot works really well, then implement successful initiatives nationally, share that, that knowledge, that passion, bring other people in to continue to enhance that. So people are your priority. We've got to make sure that the people working in our criminal justice systems are praised, they're working fairly so that they value the work that they're doing, they're motivated to work harder, faster, more efficiently, and they feel valued by all the people who are benefiting from the work that they do, whoever they are. And if they feel that they are valued, they're praised, they're working fairly, they're going to be more empowered, they're going to innovate more, they're going to continue to make your processes, your practices more timely and more efficient. And try and close that feedback loop, because it's often forgotten. But feedback from people using that information give good job satisfaction to those individuals. They'll keep them working hard, keep them passionate about the job that they're doing, and more motivated, and like increase their ability to continually develop and to continually grow your organization, and to hopefully start reducing crime by working with the investigators, investigators working with forensic scientists more closely together to help tackle the firearm-related crime that's occurring, the trafficking of firearms and ammunition into the country, or the trafficking of it out of the country. And again, trying to ensure that our communities are getting safer. So this was hopefully a really broad introduction to lots of the challenges, the opportunities, the technologies that may be useful to you. Understandably, some things you're going to have known, other things you may not have known, but hopefully I've also given you a broad international perspective around the similarities and potential differences when it comes to firearm-related incidents across the world. I do occasionally write blog posts around sort of the research and the work that I'm doing. But I try to do these kind of verbal presentations much more than my writing at the moment. So Research for Justice, you might find useful as a resource to link to research that's openly accessible, openly available from organizations across the world. So just kind of sharing that as well as a resource that if you hadn't been aware of, maybe something that your laboratory or your staff might be interested in using. So thank you very much for your time and your attention. And if you have any questions for me, I'd love to hear them.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It was a wonderful session. I request the participant, if you have any query, you can raise your hand, or if you want to question, you can, if you want to type a question, you can type a question in the chat box. In the meantime, I have a question by Ruchika Dwivedi. And the question is, what are the research perspective in field of forensic ballistics and firearm identification?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question for me?
What are the research perspective in the field of forensic ballistics and firearm identification?
So what are the research perspectives?
Okay.
So yes, so with respect to the research that I do, it's with detection of types of firearms, trying to maximize the type of intelligence that you can gather from shooting related incidents. So looking at gunshot residue analysis, looking at firing distance, looking at using laser scanning in order to determine distance of fire beyond just looking at gunshot residue patterns. Also looking at organic gunshot residue profiling, looking at the use and evaluating the use of any of the technologies that I've mentioned today, and how working with individual police forces we can support further training, research and awareness, so that we can monitor and evaluate how that change in efficiency or productivity, effectiveness, how it is, if it is benefiting those organizations, or whether it's improving things in some ways, but not, it's creating other challenges in other ways. So looking at the scientific underpinning of firearms identification using 3D imaging. So looking to see and understand how the algorithms are actually performing between sort of the Evo Finder system, the IBIS system, working with researchers internationally and practitioners internationally in order to do that. Understanding whether it's the material composition, how much it affects it, and how it affects the fired ammunition components. And then also looking to see whether we can optimize our processes for inputting fired ammunition components into our ballistics imaging systems as a result of the scientific knowledge that we're acquiring, as well as looking at the use of likelihood ratios and artificial intelligence in order to further enhance our ability to link crimes and to evaluate the strength of whether one particular firearm discharged those cartridge cases or not. So loads of different research, and there's so, I mean, I love this field because there are so many different avenues that you can investigate, you can do research on, and I really feel it's an under researched field because of that expanse and that diversity as well. So we're always looking for more research to be done, or if the research is being done, for it to be shared more openly and internationally to help other practitioners across the world.
Correct. As you already explained about the challenges, different kind of challenges we are facing during the firearm incident investigation. Here, a country like India, we have a huge population, and the area is also very much. And secondly, we do not have any database, and many crime has happened by the country-made firearms. So what are the challenges actually you are facing related to the country-made firearms, where we do not have any kind of database, where we do not have any kind of their tool mark and other things? So what are your suggestions for the law enforcement, particularly if they suspecting if they are getting something, some crime which has happened by the country-made firearms?
So yeah, I definitely say here that the relationship between your police officers, your detectives or investigators, and your forensic scientists as well as your crime scene investigators, is absolutely paramount. So this is where I possibly suggest having often and frequent briefings with all of those people present, so that the intelligence that they, or the thoughts that they've gathered from working each of these particular cases, can be shared. So crime scene investigators, for example, they might actually, if they have some understanding and awareness around how caliber and type of firearm are related to each other, if that information, if they're saying, you know, I've been attending quite a few crimes in different places where it's the same type of ammunition or the same brand of ammunition may be used, that verbal information is vital, and it can be really hard to capture. So sometimes getting people together in the same place and allowing them to share anything that they've seen feature quite frequently, or something that they think is linked, is often the best source of then investigators. So it doesn't have to be like evidentially valuable, but the information that's likely to lead them to more suspects or to link crimes together then becomes really valuable. So that was before some of our technology was implemented. That's one of the things that our police forces did, was actually invite our crime scene investigators to briefings, or if it was depending on how the professionals sort of work together. If your forensic lab experts go out to the scene, maybe, you know, you guys either have separate meetings with the CSI or you do combined meetings, and it's just whatever mechanism you feel would work to get that information out and being utilized by each other. Police officers also tend to have lots of intelligence about shootings, or information about groups of people that tend to associate with each other, that they may not actually pass out to intelligence, out to forensic experts or CSI. And again, if they have information that they think shootings are related, get them to tell you, get them to request you to actually do those manual comparisons between the cases. And the other thing that a lot of labs that are doing, so for example, you know, there are labs throughout the world that, again, for whatever reason, don't have 3D imaging systems. They're actually compiling their own database using Excel or something like that, where they can just take an image of like the head stamp or the land engraved area, and they're just keeping a database of the class characteristics, so that again you can look at the frequency of which firearms and ammunition are being utilized, and you can start to include any crime scene addresses, for example, so that again you can start to, even within the lab, look at, is there a particular type of offence or type of crime that's increasing that we're seeing being sent to the lab. And again, with any information or trends or patterns that you're seeing, you can again relate that back to your police officers as well. So, you know, but I'd love to hear kind of how you think your relationship is between the lab and your police forces as well.
Great. Thank you so much for explaining everything in detail, as we have covered all the questions by the participants. And although we are not in the actual space, so I request you to kindly accept our certificate of appreciation for delivering such a wonderful talk.
Thank you. And if anyone does have any questions at any point, you know, please do feel free to reach out to me and ask me later.
Definitely. So thank you once again. I thank you all my team member also for reaching to the different social media platforms, to spreading about the lectures and attending more and more people. I thank you all the participants, those who are live on the YouTube. And thank you team member. We'll definitely connect with more and more lecture in the future. This is announcement for the 19th National Conference of Indian Association of Forensic Odontology and the first biannual symposium of Association Forensic Odontology for Human Rights, which is going to be conducted in Mumbai, India, from 24th September to 26th September 2021. we welcome you all. And in this, if the situation will be we supposed to be situation go normal in coming September, not like this year September. So I thank you once again, Rachel, and I request Dr. Janita D'Souza to give the vote of thanks to our esteemed speaker. Dr. Janita, over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Rachel ma'am, for taking out time. Although it's weekend, but still, you took out time and gave a wonderful lecture. And I thank all the participants also. Although it is a function going on in India, but then two participants attended this webinar, and I thank all of you.
Thank you very much, and happy Diwali.
Happy Diwali.
Thank you, ma'am.
Diwali, everyone.